There's a specific type of man who hears a weird click in his car engine and doesn't reach for his phone. He doesn't panic. He doesn't call anyone. He just stands there, stares at the problem, and something shifts in his expression. Not frustration, not anxiety, something quieter, something that looks like focus. That moment tells you everything about how his mind works. When a man learns to fix things with his hands, something fundamental rewires in his brain. It doesn't happen in a classroom. It doesn't happen from watching YouTube tutorials. It happens in a barrage, in the heat, with grease under his fingernails and a problem that refuses to cooperate. Most men go through life outsourcing their problems. Something breaks, they find someone to fix it. Something fails, they find someone to explain it. There's nothing wrong with that. But men who choose to figure things out themselves made a different choice at some point in their lives. They decided that difficulty wasn't a signal to retreat, it was an invitation. Here's what psychology reveals about men who know how to fix everything, and why this skill says more about their mind than you think. When a man diagnoses a problem through physical engagement, he's not just gathering information, he's building a complete mental model of an invisible system. He's holding multiple variables in working memory simultaneously: sound, history, feel, smell, visual patterns, and he's cross-referencing all of them against experience stored in his hands, not in language. Neuroscientists call this embodied cognition. The knowledge lives below the level of words. Ask a man with this skill how he knew something was wrong, and he'll pause. He might say, "It just felt off." He's not being vague, he's reporting accurately. The knowledge doesn't exist in a sentence he can hand you. It was built through repetition, failure, and the specific silence that follows when something finally works. This creates a psychological foundation that most people completely misunderstand. Men who solve problems with their hands develop what researchers call an internal locus of control, the deep belief that outcomes are primarily shaped by their own effort and understanding, not by luck, not what other people decide, not by circumstances beyond their control. That belief changes everything. It changes how he approaches a challenge. It changes how he responds when something doesn't go his way. It changes his tolerance for ambiguity and his threshold for asking for help. It's not that he doesn't value other people. It's that he carries a deeply encoded faith in his own capacity to figure things out. And that faith wasn't given to him. It was built one solved problem at a time. This is also why men who work with their hands tend to trust their own perception over received opinion. They've been in situations where the expert was wrong, where the manual didn't account for the specific conditions in front of them, where their own judgment was the only thing that got them through. Over time, this becomes a permanent bias toward direct experience. They grow skeptical of people who speak with great confidence about things they've never physically touched. That's not arrogance. That's an epistemology built in the gap between what someone told them and what was actually true. Most men who operate this way didn't figure it out alone. They learned in the presence of someone else: a father in a garage, an older man who said almost nothing but handed over a tool and waited, a mentor who showed instead of explained. There was no curriculum, no formal lesson plan. What was being transmitted wasn't technical information, it was a relationship to difficulty, a way of being with a problem that didn't involve walking away from it. This is why this kind of competence becomes identity for men. When a skill is learned through a relationship, it carries emotional weight that no tutorial can replicate. The first real problem a man solved with his own hands is remembered with almost biographical specificity, not because of the problem itself, but because of who was there, because of what it meant, because of what it proved. This is where people completely misread men who operate this way. They see the self-sufficiency and assume it's about not wanting help. They see the quiet confidence and read it as coldness. They see the independence and call it toxic masculinity. But underneath, something entirely different is operating. Men who learned early that problems yield to patience, that the world responds to careful attention, that mastery is available to anyone willing to stay with difficulty long enough. These men developed a psychological resilience that most people never build. They learned that competence is earned, not given, that understanding comes from engagement, not from explanation, that the gap between not knowing and knowing is crossed through action, not through asking permission. And here's why this matters more than ever. There's also something about mechanical work that teaches a lesson most men never get anywhere else. Fixing something real can't be rushed the way digital tasks can. There are sequences that must be followed. There are specifications that exist for physical reasons, not bureaucratic ones. Cut a corner and the problem comes back, usually worse. And here's the critical difference. In the digital world, there's always an undo button. You can delete, you can reset, you can start over with one click. But in the physical world, there's no undo. You strip that bolt, it's stripped. You crack that part, it's cracked. The consequences are real, immediate, and irreversible. Men who internalize this lesson carry it into everything. They become unusually patient with slow processes, unusually skeptical of anything that promises a fast result, unusually resistant to shortcuts that don't account for underlying reality. But right now, research shows that more than 3/4 of young men struggling with mental health don't want to talk about it. They don't believe they need help. They're isolated in a way previous generations weren't. They were handed a digital world designed for engagement, for dopamine loops and infinite scrolling, not for their development. The result? A generation of men who have access to everything except the thing that actually builds psychological stability, the experience of physical difficulty, patient effort, and a problem that surrenders to their own hands. There's one more thing worth understanding. Working on something real is one of the last remaining contexts in which a man can be completely and verifiably right. In most areas of modern life, success is ambiguous. Did the meeting go well? Hard to say. Was the decision correct? Depends who you ask. Did you do the right thing? There's no objective measure. But something that wasn't working and now is, that's not a matter of interpretation. The feedback is absolute. The proof is undeniable. For men who spend most of their time in environments of subjective evaluation and uncertain outcomes, that kind of clarity isn't just satisfying, it's stabilizing. This is why a man who's overwhelmed doesn't always talk about it. He works on something. He finds a bounded problem with a knowable solution. He rebuilds, in miniature, the experience of competence and control that the rest of the week may have taken from him. What looks like a coping mechanism is actually a psychological reset. What looks like avoiding the problem is actually restoring the part of himself that can face it. So the question isn't whether you know how to fix a car engine or rebuild a machine. The question is whether you've built any context in your life where the feedback is real, where effort has a direct and honest consequence, where you are the one responsible for the outcome. Because the men who have that, whether they found it in a garage, on a court, in a workshop, in coding, in building, or anywhere else where the world gives a clear answer, those men carry something into every other area of their life that can't be taught in a lecture. It's a quiet confidence, a refusal to collapse under ambiguity, a deeply held belief that if they stay with it long enough, it will give way. That belief was never really about the machine. It was always about what kind of man they decided to become. If this resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. This is where we decode the psychological patterns nobody teaches you in school. Drop a comment and tell me, what's the first thing you learned to fix with your own hands, and who taught you? The answer matters more than you think.